Hi, I'm Charlie Paparelli. Sig Mosley has served on over 130 startup company boards. In this podcast, Sig shares his secrets and his wisdom and all that he's learned in serving on these boards. As an entrepreneur, if you're thinking about a board of advisors, a board of managers, or a board of directors, maybe you're as flat-footed as me. No. Sig Mosley has served on over 130 boards of directors. No. Sig Mosley no. If you're an entrepreneur who's thinking about putting together a board of advisors or a board of managers or a board of directors, maybe you're like me and you're fairly flat-footed as to what you need to do first. Here is an opportunity to listen to Sig Mosley, a 32-year angel investor. Here is an opportunity. No. This podcast is an opportunity. Here's an opportunity for you to listen to Sig Mosley. He's called the Godfather of Atlanta technology investing. Here's your opportunity to listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of Atlanta angel investing. In this episode, he speaks about boards of managers, boards of advisors, and also boards of directors. These are complex subjects depending upon how you're organized. Here's your opportunity to listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of angel investors. Here is your opportunity if you've ever thought about putting together a board of directors. If you always wondered what it would take to put together a board of directors or advisors or a board of managers, this podcast will help you. Listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of angel investing, talk about Listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of angel investing Listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of angel Listen to Sig Mosley, Listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of angel Listen to Sig Mosley, Listen to Sig Mosley, the Godfather of Atlanta angel investing. He's been doing it for 32 years. He sat on over 130 startup boards. And in this episode, he's going to talk about the experience he's gained, the wisdom and insights that he has in having served on those 130 boards. If you're thinking about putting one together, you got to listen to this one. Good listening.
Right.
Hey, welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli. Today's guest is once again Sig Mosley, and the topic that we're going to be discussing is Sig's Boardroom Secrets, crafting a governance structure for growth. Today's podcast is for entrepreneurs who are seeking angel funding, I should say, today, but they have an eye for VC funding sometime in the future. And that's why boards are so important. My guest, my friend, and my mentor is Sig Mosley. Sig is called the Godfather of Atlanta angel investing. He's invested in hundreds of deals over his 32-year career. At one point in his angel investing career, this was sort of probably around 2010, I think I asked him how many boards was he on. And I remember him giving me a number that was just north of 30. And that's when I told him how crazy I thought he was for being so involved in so many different boards. But he loves it. Last year, Sig stopped investing. And I want to tap into his experience. I want to give him a place to share his experience on different topics around entrepreneuring and investing and boards, as we're doing today. That'll be of interest for entrepreneurs and also for angel investors. And that's why I'm doing this series of interviews with Sig. While all this is still fresh in his mind, I want to make sure that I get it out of him. All right. So welcome, Sig. Thanks for doing this again.
Well, thank you, Charlie. I'm happy to do it and happy to be back on.
All right. So we're going to be talking today. The topic is on boards of directors. And I get this question asked of me from time to time, and I do give an answer, but I feel like I'm flopping around a bit. Okay. So that's why I wanted to cover this topic. You have so much experience on boards um, uh, that I don't have. Mine is more very early stage and a lot of board of advisors as opposed to boards of directors. So with that in mind, let's just start out by you telling people how many early stage boards that you've served on, whether in the capacity as advisor or director. And we'll get into that later on what the difference is between those two.
Well, the number is probably somewhere north of 125.
Gee, you're the right guy for this interview. This is really good. Okay. What was your first board? How long ago was that? And what was it?
Well, it depends. If you go back to my corporate world, I served on the board of about 20 different subsidiaries that MSA had. Now, that would have been during the period of 1980 to 1990.
So this was MSA subsidiaries that you.
Right.
And you sat on their board. Okay.
Board, and while we were on with Florida, and I was on the board in Italy, in UK, in Germany, in Australia, in New Zealand. So I had various type of board experience there.
I didn't know about that. So how back then? How old were you back then?
Well, let's see. In 80, I would have been about 45 or so.
Oh my gosh! And so you were John Imlay's representation on those boards.
Yes.
I know how much he trusted you. I thought that was a wonderful relationship you had with him.
Oh, it was. And so I was on those boards. And then when we sold MSA and it came out of the subsidiary board and we began doing angel investing, the first investment we made was Audio Flax, company you are very familiar with, Charlie. And
I actually came in. I think I became part of that board.
You did.
And coming in as the president.
Right, and I was on that board. And you may remember Charles Brewer was the chief financial officer of Audio Flax.
I will never forget that, Sig. I mean, that's when he was just coming out of, came out of the university. Well, he came out of Kentucky, and he just graduated from Stanford.
Right.
Right. Yeah. He was an interesting cat. And then from there, of course, he left AudioFax and then went on to found MindSpring.
Right.
Working with Cam Lanier. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a good history. Yep. Yeah. And then who else was on that board? You remember?
It was the father-in-law of the founder. Now, I can't remember his name.
I can't either, and he's now passed away. But
right, and he was a corporate attorney. And of course, we had the CEO of the board, the company as well, Mark.
That's correct. Okay, so that was your first board, really getting involved in your first investment as Imlay Investments, really.
Right.
And saying, okay, this is all new. So you go from these governance boards, okay, if you will, from being with subsidiaries of a public company, to now you're in the Wild West.
True Wild West.
The true Wild West. Do you continue to serve on early stage boards even since you stopped investing?
The boards I'm on now are one that I was on and how an investment in.
Okay.
Now I am on the I continue to mentor and coach entrepreneurs, but I have one board of advisors that I'm on now of a company that I'm not invested in.
Okay.
Not to say I would not join boards, but in the past year, it just hasn't come up but once.
All right. So you've been on over 130 boards. Okay.
Yeah.
And at one point in time, what was the highest number of these early stage boards that you were on?
Well, we were probably about 40.
Jesus, I still don't know how you did that. I'm just curious. In
Yeah.
fact, let's talk about that for just a second. So if you got 40 boards, how do that means you could almost you could be doing two board meeting. If they meet monthly, you'd be doing two board meetings on some days.
Well, yeah, but also remember the earlier companies meet more often than later stage companies.
Right.
So as the company progress, you meet less. You get down to where you may meet once a quarter.
Okay.
And some of the early stage ones, well, I say, as they progress and as you get more VCs involved, board meeting change and all of that.
Right. But still 40s.
40
40s.
was a crazy number. I,
Yeah.
I,
Were you working like 70, 80-hour weeks or?
yeah, we were close to that. Because remember, we were still investing at the same time. So, so I was looking at new opportunities. Uh,
Well, obviously, that's what got you into the
that,
into the and so deep in the soup
that
here, with getting to 40 boards,
right, it
you know.
was.
So that must have been a requirement of yours that you wanted to be on the board.
Uh, Most of the companies, particularly I was the lead investor because and we have talked about, with angel groups and so on, and assembling angels into what you now call an SPV, and then having somebody being the manager of that special purpose vehicle. I generally was the manager in most of the ones I did. And so at one time, I think we had like 45 or simply SPVs that we had put together.
SP. Oh, those are the
The
investor groups you're
right,
talking about. Wow. Well, we're going to have, by the way, for anybody who's listening, we're going to have another discussion on pulling together investing groups and how that might work as an angel investor. And Sig's got so much experience in that area, these SPVs and managing those. I think it's going to be really worthwhile for those of us who are angels, because that's going to be the way. Given that seed companies now, seed rounds are much larger these days, it seems, than they used to be.
yes, yes, they are.
They're requiring more and more SPVs rather than a single angel investor to kind of do his thing. What was going back to these early stage boards? How would you characterize how you've changed over these 30 years from audio facts to these more recent? Has have how your behavior on the board or the entrepreneurs and how they've changed over the years or whatever? What's Has anything changed that's notable? I mean, have
Well,
you gotten
entrepreneur.
better at it?
Well, I'm not sure I have gotten better at it, but entrepreneurs have changed. Technology had changed. The way you build businesses had changed.
Yeah.
Remember when I came into the world, you know, you wrote hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and you had big sales cycles and long sales cycles, and so
Right.
today you don't have all of that. So the way you grow businesses will change tremendously. But the basic principle is the same because as an early stage board member, you have a fiduciary duty to be sure that the entrepreneur and the company is making the best use of the resources from the shareholders. Because you, as a board member, represent both the shareholder and the company. And so you have to make sure that things are properly done. You have to be sure that all legal responsibilities are met and all of that. You still have that today versus even when I began. Uh, I think as you work with entrepreneurs over a period of time, you get to know more how to interact with entrepreneurs, how to interact with people. So that will make it better and easier to be a board of directors member.
So this was something that you did have to learn in
Yes,
early stage, is to say, I know how to interact with what I would call professional managers, right? And
right.
other professional board members, now all of a sudden you enter the wild west of angel investing in early stage startups. And
Right,
you had to really learn about how to be effective in communicating as a board member or advisor to entrepreneurs.
right. You do, and you have to learn how to read entrepreneurs
Huh.
because
What does
one,
that mean?
well, it means how you have to understand how they operate, and when they say something, they may mean it or they may not mean it. Very different than the corporate world. Take audio flax. You know, Mark was an interim CEO in the end because I found out some things about him as we went along that had I known, I might have changed some of the ways I approached him. But
Okay.
you don't know that until you work with somebody a while. And the more entrepreneurs you work with, the easier it get to understand how they operate. But that
Right.
doesn't mean you always are right. But
No, but what happens, what you're saying though, is something that's very important. And this is important to entrepreneurs and also for any board members that they might have, which is to say, this is a specialty area, this very early stage startup area, and that you got to be careful who you're partnering with as a board member or advisor, because you got to say, well, what's their experience with dealing with early stage company and just as importantly, entrepreneurs?
yeah,
That's what I hear you saying.
oh yeah, you do.
So you've gotten really good, obviously,
Well, I have gotten
with
better.
entrepreneurs.
I have gotten better.
Wow.
You
Is
know,
there somebody that you know who might be more experienced and maybe learned faster than you that's actually better than you as an advisor?
well, I think it depends on what they need. And again, it comes from is an angel or a VC type investor who is
Hmm.
serving on the board. You know, I can think of one VC in particular. He serves on 24 boards at one time, and he likes to work on holidays and everything else. He
Yeah.
doesn't get along very well with all of the entrepreneurs because he thinks he knows better how to run the company than they do. I don't know that I know how to run the company better, but I
Well,
know
your
how to.
background is the finance background. You're an accounting background,
Right.
right? Is this guy's background more operations, or did he come from that background, or
Yes,
is he more?
he,
Oh, he did.
he
Okay.
came from operation.
This is one of the issues that I had to deal with as I began as an angel investor. Is I had to realize I was no longer operating companies, and you can't just show up once a month, even, or worse yet, once a quarter, and be the smartest guy in the room with regard to what the next step of the operation needs to be. You really have to take on this mantle of an investor and sort of limit what
Right.
how you share your experience.
Right. And there's one guy that I know, he had trouble doing that. He still believes he can operate.
Yeah, and and I do say that. I do tell people like I interviewed Matt Stevens, going from operator to investor. You have to realize those are two different occupations,
Yes, they are.
and you can't be you can't get better and better as an operator by being an investor. You
No.
get better and better at being an investor by being an investor, and then you start your operating skills. They start to become dated.
Well, they do, but at least in a VC type world, I believe being an operator brings significant advantage in that you have experienced the problems that entrepreneurs are going to run into. You've been there, you have had to solve them. So you bring a background that is very good to help them as long as you know how to communicate that to the entrepreneur.
I agree with that. And and what it is though is I find is the further away from operating I've become, right?
Right.
Is I find that my advice starts to become higher and higher level
Right.
advice,
Yeah.
not on the ground advice, because I don't understand the business environments that he's operating in. Okay. For example, what kind of advice am I going to give somebody who's managing uh, a remote employment base, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I never did that. Do I have ideas and opinions? Sure.
Yeah.
Are they valid? Maybe.
Yeah.
But I have to be careful that I don't say this is the way to go.
Right.
He's
Well,
doing it. He or she is doing it every single day and dealing with all these issues.
yeah. Well, think what I have gone through, because back when I began, mainframe software was still the primary way.
Right.
And, you wrote hundreds of thousands of lines of code. You sold it under what we call an enterprise type model, where you might sell a package for $1 million.
Right.
And now you look at what we have gone through in going into the um, mini software, then into the micro software. Now we have the SaaS model versus the enterprise model. There have been a lot of changes that I have had to adopt and go through.
Yeah. And that you've you've seen them all. The one of the things I just want to share is I had a partner that I would do deals with, and he was an operator too. And I just can't. I'll never forget the entrepreneurs we would deal with, like in board meetings. Okay, and he would bring up his experience when he ran ABC Company. It would be like John Emley, who ran, right, MSA and this massive direct sales force of high level enterprise guys, talking to somebody who's running an enterprise sales force today, and him saying, when I ran MSA back in 1984, I mean, just think as you're the entrepreneur that's sort of building, your eyes are going to roll. It's like 1984. I wasn't even born yet.
I bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're talking to me about what you did then. You don't understand what's going on. So we can date ourselves. We have to be very careful as former operators on how we share that information.
Oh, you do.
Otherwise, you lose credibility. It's like,
Yeah.
here it comes again. John's gonna share his wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
May be totally wrong today.
Yeah, I was in an Angel Lounge planning meeting yesterday, and one of the we were talking about opportunities in investing. That every company now is an AI company, right? Every
Yeah.
company's an AI company,
Mm-hmm.
and this VC, who's now in his late 50s, made a comment. He said, "Oh yeah," he said, "AI is like the back in the .com days." He says, it was like talking about the internet. Like that internet wasn't a business. It just happened to be a backbone, right? Now you had to make a business out of using the internet. And he said, so I think that a lot of people are chasing AI like we did chase the .coms back in the late 90s. And I said, yeah, but no one's going to listen to you because you don't understand that things are different now.
Yeah.
It's just it. How do you apply something from 25 years ago to today if you're somebody who's 23 years old?
Yeah. You don't.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
How do I take that information in?
Yeah.
So, but
Very.
he's right. I agree with him. AI is like talking about the internet in the 90s.
Well, it is, and right now I think we still have to figure out what AI really is, because AI will be different things to different industries, I believe.
Well, that's true also for the internet back in the 90s, right? What is really the internet, and what is it? How is it applied, and what industries, and how will they
Well,
use it?
yes and no, in the fact that the internet gave a different way of doing almost everything.
I see.
Because you just think about, you went from an ERP type software that ran on mainframes to an ERP that would run on minis, and then it would run on a PC.
Yeah.
And so so you brought in a whole different element of ways of doing things. You did away with paper in so many different industries, because you could now computerized it. It was harder to do before the internet. And so with AI, I'm still waiting to see where AI fall out. I think that financial services, healthcare, and a couple of other maybe age tech industries will make better use of AI
I
than
read
others.
something recently. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. I read something recently by what was the name of the guy that runs ChatGPT? I just sort of drew a blank on that.
Uh,
But he was being interviewed, and he was talking about this last release of ChatGPT, which gets into generative AI.
uh,
Okay, and they were just using the acronym. I had to actually look it up and say, so what's GAI and kind of thing. But this is where they really project that it's really going from there. Now they're thinking horizontally here. Okay, they're not thinking
uh,
vertically or functionally. But what was interesting about it was they're saying generative AI is really all about replacing people completely. Okay, not being used to help you become more efficient, but to say, oh, this is the job you used to do. Generative AI
AI will not.
does the job
Yeah,
versus just AI. The generative means, oh, yeah, they start thinking and acting like human beings. That's this next stage. And that would be a pretty big corporate impact.
that would be a big corporate impact. But see, all the changes we have been talking about are things that the investors have to learn to keep up with to continue to invest and be good advisors to the companies.
Thanks
Because
for bringing it back to that, Sig, because that was the thought that I had as I have moved along in my career and no longer investing also. But, as I got, I always said I had a lot higher value in the first 10 years of my career than I did at the last 10 years of my career for a startup because I had a great network of people that I could bring to the startup. Okay, I understood the technology, I understood the distribution channels. I mean, I was very close to it. As you move out further and further, your advice gets higher and higher because you don't understand these
right,
things.
and yeah, but you also have to keep up to a minimum to be able to get even the higher and higher advice.
No, I agree. I agree. But I mean, that just says this is what happens as we say, oh, well, that guy, he's 60. He would be great for my board,
Yeah,
as an advisor. Maybe not.
no, no,
Maybe not. All right. It really would be. He might have a lot of wisdom, but from where you are and what you need, you maybe need that guy that's 40, not the guy that's 60.
right.
That makes a difference. So they're, yeah. All right. Let's get back to boards. That was interesting. Is when we talk about boards, we need to speak about the different legal entities. Okay. So could you talk about the different legal entities and then and how that affects boards of directors versus boards of advisors, how that all might how all of that works. So why don't you talk to
Okay.
that just briefly so that entrepreneurs can understand how to apply what we're about to talk about. Okay, go ahead.
Basically, you have three primary corporate type. You have an LLC, you have an S corp, and a C corp.
Okay.
With an LLC, you do not have a formal board of directors. You can have a board of advisors, but an LLC either has a single manager member that is the manager of it, or they have a board of managers. But
Right.
board of manager generally have to be all people who have invested in the company. You do not see very many board of managers. Most of them are single managers who generally is the entrepreneur. S corps and C corps are those two are much more alike in that you are required legally to have a board of directors in each, and you can have a board of advisors in addition to the board of directors. Uh, Now, a board of directors, depending on what slate you are incorporated in, will determine what the minimum number of board members are. Most board of directors have a minimum of 3 people on the board.
When you get into these S corps and C corps, are the responsibilities more clearly defined as to what the board of directors is in fact responsible for? Because I know it's ill-defined in a board of managers for an LLC.
Well, it is and it isn't.
Okay.
In the sense that it is defined that you do, as a board of directors, you do have fiduciary responsibility to both your shareholder and your creditors of the company to be sure that the company is being properly managed.
Otherwise, you have legal liability.
You have legal liability. That is why, if you serve on the board of directors, one of the first questions you should ask is, do you have D&O insurance? And
Which
if
is
not,
what stands for what?
director and officers insurance
Okay.
to cover you for liabilities. And if you don't have it, that it should be one of the first items on the board agenda to begin to look for it.
So if you're in a subchapter S or a C corp and you're invited to the board of directors, you need to know that you now have official fiduciary responsibility to creditors and shareholders.
Yes.
Okay. And if you mismanage or if you don't do your job properly, then you're open to being sued by one of those two groups or both.
You are, and that is why you have officer and director insurance that will cover your liability unless you commit fraud or, whatever.
Right.
What
about an LLC?
LLC, you don't have a board.
You have a board of managers, possibly.
Possibly. But if you are a single member manager, you don't have officers per se.
That's right.
You have a manager, and you generally don't worry about D&O in that case because it's generally you.
Yeah, and then you don't worry about D&O either, is because generally what you do, if you do have, and I've had this in some of my LLC agreements, you have a board of managers, and the board of managers are all investors.
Right.
So they're all in it together.
Right.
And so you don't really have that issue of having to worry about being sued by one of your fellow investors.
Right. Now and because all 3 of the legal entities that you can't, somebody who sues you can't really go out of you and your asset. You can only sue and go out of the assets of the corporation or the LLC unless you commit fraud. If you write yourself $1 million checks and take the money out of the company, then they could go beyond the corporate veil, in that case, to come out of you.
Well, that makes sense. Now, this is something for entrepreneurs, I think, that they need to keep in mind. You can't be freewheeling when you start talking about if you're a sub S or you're a C corp. You can't be very freewheeling with regard to asking people to just be on the board of directors, particularly people who are inexperienced in board matters, okay, because they are taking on this mantle of fiduciary responsibility where they have legal liability. And, a lot of times what happens is people go, yeah, we're a sub S. We want you to be on the board. And, it's my friend or it's my fraternity brother and all this. And it could get into some pretty nasty sort of, you don't know. In other words, know what you're asking someone to do. That's what I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Do you find that that's true with some of these companies that you've approached or that have approached you for investment?
Yeah, some of them are that way. But if you really think about it, and we'll get to the more detail later, at the early stage, you don't have that big a board, though. So, the number of times that happened is not as frequent as you might think, only because you have a tiny board. And when I say tiny, I mean 3 members.
Yeah, but still, those 3 members, if it
But
is an S or a C, they do have legal
they
liability.
do have legal liability. And the one
Okay.
other area that you have liability in, if the company doesn't pay payroll tax and so on, and withholding tax, uh, whoever has check signing authority can be personally held liable
By
for
the IRS.
by the IRS in all 3 cases.
And give me the 3 cases again.
The LLC, the S, and the C corp.
Oh, I see. Oh, and I
Uh,
see. In all 3 entities is what
right,
you said.
all
I got it.
3
Okay.
entities.
Yeah, the IRS, they got a pretty broad brush, especially on payroll tax
Yes.
withholding.
Yeah, and they do emphasize it.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Easy one to kind of figure out.
Yeah.
So, what is the difference, if we're talking for entrepreneurs, what's the difference between a board of advisors versus a board of directors?
Okay. A board of
And
advisors.
then, and how should they choose between the two? So, kind of hold those together.
Okay. The board of advisors is a group of people who you look for, the entrepreneur look to for advice. They have no legal obligation to the shareholder. They have no obligation to anybody. They are just there to give advice to you as you need it and want it. The board of directors has a fiduciary duty to protect the corporation, the shareholders, and the creditors. They are not, they are there to give advice, but they are there to supervise how the company is running. So
Mm,
what you want on the board of advisors is if as you grow your business, you don't if you don't if they are a big enough market, you want somebody on your board of advisor who understands your market and that may look at your market from a different way than you look at the market. They might, like if you're looking at the trees in the forest, you want somebody who is looking at the whole forest, who
yeah.
can help keep you up to date on how the market is moving. If you might have somebody who is very good in sales to help you figure out how to sell. You might have a CPA on your board of advisor to help you with your financial matters. So what you need help in and what you think and you generally know where you need help. You want those kind of people on your board of advisors. You generally a board of advisors they might meet once or twice a year, but you might have calls with them every other month, and different boards of advisors giving you different ways depending on
But
what the
why would I? Why
entrepreneur
would I?
needs.
But if I'm an entrepreneur and I say, I do need advice, why would I even think about doing a board of advisors as opposed to just having advisors, right? I mean, now I don't have some sort of a semi-formal entity, another group that I have to communicate with. If I need some sales advice, I go to a sales guy. If I need some financial advice, I go to a finance guy. You see, why would I form get to this sort of more formal thing called a board of advisors rather than just have 5 people that give me good advice?
Because you want people who have an interest in your business. Because a
Hmm.
board of advisors is generally compensated by options in the company. So they have an equity interest in the company. So they have an interest in being involved in the company and making sure that the company does well.
So why would I want that? Then now I'm giving up equity when I could just basically just ask these people, say, hey, call me if you need help.
Because you want people who will really tell you the way it is. You don't want people who will just tell you what you want to hear. Like in the area of marketing, you want to find somebody who is probably a reasonably big name in your industry that has an interest in your business and that is willing to help you grow your business and helping you succeed and making it
So,
work.
so in order for that to work, you have to basically compensate them
right,
in some way,
in some way.
so that otherwise they're just giving you the best advice they have in that hour of that day.
That right, and
Yeah, you're not on their mind all the time as they go forward.
right, and they'll take your call whenever you call them. You know, it, where you just got John Doe out there that you call every once in a while. You know, you might get him, you might not get him. He might not be current on what is happening. So you want somebody who is involved in the market that you are in and that is interested in what you are doing. So they have to believe in you and your product. And so
Is there a benefit for somebody to be on a board of advisors? Besides the financial, just the financial. I'm talking about, is there other benefits?
not really.
What about network wise or career wise or?
Well, most of the people who are on the board of advisors are already out there in their own network and so on.
Oh, I see.
The
Okay.
area that it would benefit them would be if you have a success like a Google, and you can say, I was on the board of advisors of Google in the beginning, and I helped them.
What about does as an entrepreneur choosing a board of advisors, is that going to help me if I'm looking for financing or through either angels or eventually VCs and all that are they helpful there?
They are helpful, more so if they are well known. The better known they are, if you can get somebody in your industry that is well known throughout the world in your industry and they serve on your board of advisors, that helps fulfill part of what angels and VC look for in market knowledge.
Well, it shows that if this guy's on it, he knows what he's doing. So this must be he's lending his credibility to the entrepreneur and to the business, I would think.
Well, that is true, but you have to also be careful that you don't get somebody on your board of advisors who doesn't understand early stage companies. Because and I don't mean to pick on UPS, but I will since they're here in town. You put a senior vice president of UPS and say marketing on your board as a marketing person, I wouldn't necessarily say you would get the best advice because he may not know what you need at an early stage company versus what a growth stage company needs. So you
Wow. So and VCs certainly understand this, right? They go
yes,
like, well, that's great that guy is on there, but he's not going to help somebody that has, $1.5 million in recurring revenue.
right. And he probably hasn't seen an early stage market presentation in 10 years.
I think that's great. Okay. So, um, so then that begs the question then, if you're this sort of sub-$1 million in revenue kind of technology company, if you choose to do a board of advisors, okay, early on like that, you told me you would choose that because you want their advice. You think
Right.
that they can help you get from 1 to 10, right?
Yes.
Okay. How do you go about making the choice who should be on that advisory team? How big is that advisory team?
Advisory team can be anywhere from 2 to probably 5 people,
Okay.
depending on what you need. And the way you go about it is that, like angel investor, I would tell the entrepreneur, you need to find somebody in the industry who can bring you market knowledge that you might not have and help you figure out marketing in that industry. Then I would have him go out and try find the person and then come back and talk about why that is the right person to put on.
Okay. So that's one.
That one. Uh, Again, it could be sales.
Okay.
It could be finance. It could be development even. If you are working with some very different type of technologies, maybe something that's reasonably new, maybe you need some to be able to consult with somebody in the industry who is already using that. So it really depends on what you think you need help with.
Is the bigger the bigger board of advisors, is it get even more complex?
Well, I
Uh,
would never probably go above 5 on the
right.
board of advisors.
But
You,
is five even inefficient compared to having a board that's really two, plus you, if you will, as the entrepreneur?
it depends on what kind of help you need, and
Right.
you know if you think all the help you need in marketing, and your board of directors agrees with you, then you might just have a one person on your advisory board. At that point, you might not even create a board. You might just go out and find the right person and give them some options to
Right.
be involved. You generally create the board when you have 2, 3, or 4 people. Uh,
Which makes sense. It's interesting that you jumped ahead of me and you said that, the board of directors might think this. I didn't even think that these guys had a board of directors yet. You see, they're such a small company, but if they are a C or an S, they have to have a
that,
board of
they
directors.
have to
Okay.
have a board. Now, and if you happen to be in one of those slates that only requires 1 or 2 directors, it might just be you, it might be the entrepreneur and your co-founder.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That could be your board.
Well, when you look at this board of advisors, because I see that being exercised a heck of a lot more. I mean, that's the help that they need, really on the ground help
Right.
from experts, if you will. How do you compensate them? Cash is at a premium, okay? So how do you compensate these people?
You do it through options. You you generally give them somewhere between 1/4%, 0.5%, and it vests over a 2 or 3 year period.
Okay. So I'm signing up for 2 to 3 years as a board of advisors,
Yeah,
and I'm looking to get 1/4% of common
yeah.
or 0.5% of common, depending upon. And could I be an advisor that gets a 0.5% over 3 years, and you're an advisor only gets a 1/4%, or is there
Well,
equality in all of this?
you get into a complicated area. You are. You generally the board of advisors are compensated equally. However, if you have one particular board member that you want to call on more and use in a different way, i.e., he might actually be a consultant to the company. In addition to being a board of advisor member, he might send, like, let's say your board of advisor members send, they meet twice a year.
Yeah.
This guy you might meet with this guy every month
Okay.
because for whatever his specialty is, you need his help more. You need a lot more help than just advice. You actually need his expertise to build the business. You would do a consulting agreement with him separate from the board of advisors.
Okay, so he would get the same amount of money as a board of advisors, but as this additional work that he's doing, that's a consulting agreement, and then he would get different option package for that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you do it to keep peace in the kingdom.
You
Everybody being involved in the board of advisors
get the same.
will get the same compensation as far as the option pool goes.
Right.
Okay. And how do you decide between 1/4% and 0.5% per person?
You talk to your attorney and you talk to your board of directors, and you see what it market at that time.
Okay.
So you have to, in some cases it's determined by the person too, because some people won't do it for a 1/4 point. They just say no. So you have to figure out how much you really need some people. Most of the time, your attorney, and I'm going to get off on one of my tangents here. If you don't have an attorney, you're in bad shape to begin with. One of the first people you should have employed is your early stage attorney, who can help you go through all the, because you're going to need a board of advisor agreement, and you're going to need an option agreement and all kinds of things. And if you don't have a good corporate attorney, you're in trouble.
Yeah, then you're freewheeling and you're just sort of making promises. Man, that doesn't turn out too well.
No.
Yeah.
And you got
Even in good times.
and you got to have the right kind of attorney early stage. A overall corporate attorney and not the right attorney.
Well, one of the things that when you say something like that, I say, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, though, attorneys cost money, right? So you have to do this stuff. How much I have seen entrepreneurs that had on their speed dial their attorney, and all of a sudden, what you do is you sort of you look at this company and you realize they owe the attorneys, $65,000, and they're looking to raise money, part of which will pay off the
Attorney.
attorneys. So how do you tell an entrepreneur, how do you regulate your interaction with these attorneys? And maybe this is a situation where AI can actually prove itself to be valuable to you in generating these types of agreements.
Well, yeah, I don't. I hesitant to get into that because I
All
don't
right,
like.
well, park that. Park
I,
that. Go to the first question. Go to the first question.
I
I blabbed a little too much on that one.
While it costs money, you need to negotiate with your attorney up front.
Okay.
To why would particularly your early stage attorneys will either bill you at a discounted rate or they will set on their bill till you raise money.
Hmm.
But you got to be sure that you do things right. I had one company where they had gotten an attorney to do all their documents. When I went to put money in them, we made them redo every single document because they were not done properly for an early stage company. So they had used the wrong attorney. You draw up an option plan that doesn't meet the rules of the IRS. You have to redo it. Your sales agreement or whatever kind of agreement you have with your customers. It's very important that that document is done right because otherwise you can have all kind of liability that can be sitting out there. And so to me, it's critical that you have a good attorney. You work with them. That you and them need to sit down and negotiate how the sleeves are going to work. And if he's a good guy, he'll tell you if you call him too much or you call him about something that he doesn't.
Are attorneys allowed to take equity as payment?
Yeah, but most of them will not. Oh, if they do, they take some equity, but they want some cash too, because
Yeah. And
they
so when you get to these earlier stage attorneys, are you dealing with solo practitioners mostly?
not necessary. You
Okay.
got people like Morris Manning Martin. You got Nelson Mullins. You got DLA Piper.
Mm-hmm.
You got then you get down to lesser known names and so on. They all have early stage practices, and you. The other thing you need to find the early stage attorney who you can work with and who you are comfortable dealing with. You need to have a relationship with that attorney, not just he my attorney and I'll call him but you and he need to
What
figure out
does that mean? What
how
does
to
that
work
mean?
together.
Having a relationship. What does that mean?
Just being able to call it is like you and I have a relationship. Now we know how to talk to one another and how to invest and how to do things. You want to have an attorney who you call and you trust everything they tell you, and you know
That's
that
one of those you get me, I get you kind of a
yeah
deal. I
you
get you. Gotcha. Whereas you're getting to a corporate attorney who's trying to do startups, he doesn't get me and I don't get him.
that right.
So that makes sense. The other thing is, what was the name of that attorney? He's since passed away. This was years ago. He was from one of the big law firms. He retired and then he started. His name was Michael, and
Michael, yes, I can
having
see
trouble.
him, but I don't remember.
I could see him too. He passed away on a ski trip. I remember he
Right,
was in Europe, but he when he retired from one of the top law firms here in town and huge.
yeah,
And he decided he wanted to help entrepreneurs. So it was a whole new market for him. And he fixed priced his work.
right, and more and more
If you
and
want
more.
a sales agreement, it's X.
Yeah,
If you wanted an options agreement, it's Y,
right.
and so you
Yeah,
knew you
right,
weren't getting the clock run up on you.
right. And most of them will do something like that today.
They will.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's being adopted by these
but
early
again,
stage
you
these
have to
practitioners in early stage.
right, but you had to get them. You had to know what it is up front, and you had to act at what they're going to do.
All right, that makes sense. So here's another thing that helps. I think when I get approached by people saying, "What kind of if do I need a board?" And secondly, what kind of board? And we talked a lot about, do you need a board? First, board of advisors and a board of directors. But if we can talk the different stages of a company's growth, if you will, and what is the purpose of the board at the different stages? So that I know, oh, so this is a 2-3 year deal. Then this is going to be, and we're going to reconstitute this to be a different board, and then that goes for a while, and then we'll reconstitute that to be a different board. Things don't go forever, including entrepreneurs. You might
Huh?
not make it through all those
Well,
transitions.
that is true.
Okay.
You might not.
Yeah.
Well, the initial board at the beginning, it's traditionally three people, and I'm
So
talking about.
this is a startup.
Yes,
So
true.
what are we talking about? Like in maybe so describe the different phases of the company first, so that we got that, and then we'll go down and dig into
Well,
that a
the
bit.
phases of the companies is driven by when you raise money and who you raise money from.
Okay,
Because when you raise your first
let's call these stages, right? This is what people call it, the
well, no,
stages.
because they don't really, it doesn't really necessarily go by stage.
Oh, I see what
Because
you're saying.
think about it this way, Charlie. You have your angel, well, you have your friends and family. You probably going to have maybe, you may have two people or maybe three people on the board when you do your friends and family.
Okay,
Most of those are going to be company people, people
yeah,
out of the company. Because more than likely, none of your friends and family are going to want to join the board, and they shouldn't.
except in Mark's case.
Well, yeah. Well, Mark, sure. Well, one could argue that Mark's father-in-law represented one of the company members, because the company
Yeah,
can
right,
designate
because he was
the
so close.
right, because the company can designate who they want as their members.
Okay, so you got friends and family as a phase.
Plays.
Okay,
Then you have the angel round. And when you
okay,
get to the angel round, more than likely you'll either have three or five members of the board,
okay,
preferably three, will be two company people and one angel investor on the board.
got it. What if
Then,
it's five?
well, five, then you will have uh, two from the company, two investors, and one independent. And the reason for the independent is to kind of break a tie to keep balance on the board between the company and the investors.
Okay.
So you got two, you could get a situation where they would never get anything done. Because the two company people would say yeah, the two investors might say no. So you need kind of a third party independent person to look at what is happening in the company.
And when you get into these three people on the board, like the angel, so an angel investment is made, okay, and it's like you and maybe three other angels joined you, all right, and they say yes, Sig needs to be on the board, okay. So Sig's on the board, and there's two company people on the board, okay. How does the voting rights work and stuff like that board wise?
Board wide, it can be two against one, but you have it in your funding documents what has to be approved by the board and what items have to be approved by the board with the angel investor being one of the two that has to approve it.
So that's where you can have a 1% ownership position, but this outside's power
Yes.
and authority over, because you're itemizing decisions that might need to be made, and who has the power or authority to make those decisions.
Right. Yes, you are. And that is done in your funding document.
Hmm. So it's not like where people think, well, I have board members, but what does it matter? I still own 62% of the company.
Yeah. No.
I could do whatever I want.
Not true. In most,
So in your funding documents as an angel investor,
I put.
did you include this
Oh yeah.
this thing? Did you include this with the first deal that you were in?
No, because that was a note. That was not an equity investment, if I remember correctly.
So it was a convertible note.
Yes.
Okay. So you just put yourself in front of all of the shareholders.
Right.
I got it.
Well,
how about that? So let's say you put quite a bit of money in that company. So when you did a convertible note, was there a forced conversion in it? One, and secondly, is if there were there riders on there that say when this converts, this is how the board of directors my position will be, and what decisions need to be made.
Generally, you don't address that in the early stage convertible notes. You generally don't address that.
So you would have been in a situation where you would have converted and you would have been a minority holder, and the CEO would have been able to do whatever he wanted to do. CEO founder.
Well, yeah, except depending on remember, convertible notes generally are converted when you have a round of funding. Mm-hmm. So that round of funding would have probably included those kind of options.
Okay. Well, I don't want to go too far down this because we're going to have another discussion about financial instruments and how to structure these deals, which I think will be pretty telling on a lot of this. Well, but let's talk about boards again. Okay. So you said you got different phases, and the phases are determined by funding. So you had friends and family was one.
Yeah.
Which gets you mostly just company people on the board.
Right.
Small board. And then you go to angel investing where you can have anywhere between 3 and 5 people, 2 people being company, 1 angel, or two people in the company, 2 angels, and 1 independent.
Right.
Okay. Meaning he doesn't have this vested interest, if you will.
Right. He should not be an investor in the company.
Okay.
He should be an independent, and generally independent in the sense that he knows you like somebody who is in the same industry to be that independent.
Does he have, why is he on the board? How is he being compensated?
Option.
So now he's lost some independence.
Well, yeah. Except he never exercises them.
That's right. He has the option, right? To not put any money in. Yeah, yes. I get it. Okay. So then what's the next phase?
The next phase would be when your VCs come.
Oh, the VCs.
And generally there you will go to a 5 or 7 person board, depending on the number of investors you have coming in. Again, on a 5 person board, it would be 2, 2, and 1. Or if you go to a 7 person board, it would probably be 3, 3, and 1, or it could be 2, 2, and 3, depending on how many independents they wanted on the board.
How would you, and so when you get, let's just step back for just a second, because there was one other question that I had. When you get to this angel investment level, okay, where you had either 3 people or 5 people, who's the chairman of the board? Who runs the board in that circumstance?
You're generally
the angel financing phase.
Generally the entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur does. Okay, yeah. Now you get to the VC stage. Who's the chairman at that point?
Most of the time it continues to be the CEO.
CEO is chairman, okay. Because, the thing about this is, what does an entrepreneur know about being the responsibility of chairman of the board?
Well,
how do they cross the Rubicon of, I'm CEO founder to now I'm chairman of the board when I'm sitting in the meeting? You see?
But chairman doesn't really mean a whole lot. That just means the person who runs the board meeting. And the CEO,
but don't they set the agendas and everything else?
Well, yeah, but the agenda is generally whatever the update on the company is. So the CEO is the one that has to prepare anyway.
Okay.
So
Okay.
because if the chairman is a non-executive chairman, i.e., he doesn't work in the company, how can he set the agenda? Because he doesn't know what needs to be reported to the board. The operations. All he could say is that the CEO will present the update.
I think that the term you use there is important too for entrepreneurs to understand. There's executives, okay, and non-executives, okay.
Yeah,
That's a good way to say inside the company, outside the company, okay.
right.
So is a non he said an executive chairman is what we're going to have, okay, for the first three phases of financing. So friends and family, angel, and VC. But then as you go through VC rounds, does anything change? So you go from a series A to a series B to or a series A to A1 to A2. You follow me?
Well,
Now
yeah.
you got new investors coming in as professional investors. What happens to the board during those phases?
Well, the primary when you go from angel to VC, most of the time the angel investor get taken off the board. At that point, he may be a board observer, i.e., he doesn't have a voting seat, but he can participate in the meetings. But the VCs will take control of the board and how all of the voting board. It's not until you get to probably the C round that you would actually may have an independent chairman of the company
Okay.
on the board. Because that by the time you get to the C round, you are really growing the company and you raise the money for growth, and that is when you probably would get a chairman of the board.
And you're saying not only a non-executive who's chairman, okay, but also an independent non-executive chairman.
Yeah.
And the VCs would basically appoint that person?
That person, it depends on whether or not the chairman is an officer or not. A chairman, you can have an officer position, a chairman position that is not an officer of the company. In which case, the board would elect who is the chairman.
Okay. And then the next phase of funding could be just going public,
Public
right?
or,
Okay. And then at that point,
then you you have a public board. Your directors are elected by your shareholders, and then they will appoint the chairman.
got it. Okay. So when I get to, so let's work from the bottom up, okay? So what's the purpose of a friends and family board? That phase. What are they really there to achieve, if anything? Okay.
The board at that point is just a legal requirement being met.
Perfect. Next phase, angel phase.
Once
What are they trying to accomplish? What's their purpose?
Their purpose is, again, at that point, whoever is the board member is who has a fiduciary responsibility to the investors, all investors, and to creditors of the company. So he is there to make sure that the company is being properly managed and to help however he can the entrepreneur grow and get the business to a viable position.
So they become sort of a sustainable company.
Right. Yes.
That's what we're getting to. And now we're talking about the angel board, okay? What are their responsibility to the creditors and other shareholders?
Well, they have the fiduciary duty to be sure that the money is being sent properly. And then they would have the responsibility that if the company runs into trouble, trying to figure out how to appropriately dissolve or wind down the company. And you have somebody that is looking at the creditor as well as the shareholder.
Okay.
And that is part of your fiduciary responsibility.
What about communication responsibility? Do I have to communicate with anybody? Do I communicate if you're on the angel board, okay, and there's five other angels that sort of came in behind you, okay, with you, and let's say there's friends and family, right? So they already have positions in the company. As a board, an angel board, not just the angel on the board, okay, but as an angel board, what are your responsibilities as far as communicating goes?
It depends on what in the legal docs on the money that you took from the angels. That the investment, the purchase agreement will outline when you need to have a budget, what reporting you do to shareholders, uh, and when you have to have an audit that you do. That will all be spelled out in the investment agreement.
What if it's not? Just for what's well, let's say it this way. What would you say is sort of proper for defining this communication that should be in the documents?
Well,
What's good communication?
a good communication. Well, well,
Acceptable is,
you have
minimum once a year, okay?
you have two levels of communication. That you have communication to the board. When did
Yeah.
the board get to see things? Normally, the board will get communicated with. It could be monthly or it could be quarterly, but you have in the document that the board will get financial document at a minimum of however many times a year that the board will meet X number of time of the year. Then you would have that all investors would get certain financial requirements. It could be every quarter, it could be every 6 months, it could be once a year. Uh, it depends on what is negotiated by the angel investors to with the
What do you look to? What do you look to receive?
investor or a board member.
Well, as an investor, what would you like as
Uh, Early stage minimum quarterly.
okay,
Probably in the first year or two, monthly would be better.
got it.
And then, of course, I would want an annual audit.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. And so what was I going to say? So you go back is so when you move from an angel driven board, okay, which that's going to be meeting. That's another one. When do they meet? Are they meeting monthly
It,
or are
it,
they meeting quarterly?
it varies by the angel and or the VC. All those kind of decisions are driven by the investor and the docs that they sign when they took the investment. Now, some VC only want to meet quarterly. They don't want to meet monthly. I don't believe I have seen anybody that meet less than monthly, particularly in the early stage. I mean, less than quarterly in the early stage.
Right, because too much happens too
Right.
fast. So
And
I
that,
think you said earlier that they probably will start out if it's the initial angel investing, you're going to start out sort of monthly.
right.
And then over a period of time, you're going to
Yeah.
realize we really should extend this to quarterly.
Yeah. But
You could
probably
even
by
do
the end,
bi-monthly, right? I mean, you could
yeah.
do that too. Yeah. So,
Well, but more than likely you'll go from monthly to quarterly, and more than likely that will happen when you take your VC money.
so then, okay. So then you get the VC and you go there. Okay. This might be a good time to cover this too. Is so when you go from angel to VC, and you've done this as an angel investor, the VCs now picked up the funding ball, if you will, right?
Yes.
So they're carrying it going forward, the financing ball. You've asked for something called visitation rights. What does that mean? How is that defined? One, and secondly, what is it in reality?
Well, it actually called observation rights.
Okay, observation
What
rights.
it means that you get all of the board material that is given to board members, all of the written documents, financial, and you get to sit in on the board meetings. You just do not get to vote on anything. Now, when you
So
get
this gets into okay. So it sounds when you say the word observation, it sounds like yeah, you can show up and we'll give you the package, but shut up. Okay.
well, I was
What
just going
happens in
to.
reality? Okay.
Well, in reality, you have two different kinds. Some boards you are free to talk about and ask questions like you are a board member, and you'll sit at the board table. You treat it as a board member, except you don't get to vote.
Got it. Okay.
Other boards, observation rights are exactly what they are. Observation right. You sit on the back row of the chairs, away from the main table. You listen and you don't say anything.
Which are more? Which is it when these VCs, if you will, uh, grant you observation rights? Which of those two is the most likely scenario on a Series A? Okay, that first
It,
round after the angel. Okay.
it depends upon the relationship of the angel investor and the VCs.
Ah,
I developed a very good working relationship with a number of VCs. And in most cases, I got to sit at the table and I could ask questions. Not true. I have a company now that I'm not the observer. My GP in the fund is the observer, and she doesn't get to ask very many questions.
what happened? Like, go back to you were an investor, an angel investor. I think it might have all happened contemporaneous, but I think you were an angel investor in ISS.
Yeah.
And then the VCs came in shortly after, or was that all contemporaneous financing? You just became part of the VC round.
Well, we became part of the VC round, but we gave the money early, but it would tie into the VC round.
And it
John,
all happened within a very short time frame.
yes, it did.
So
But
you never
John,
went from an angel board to a VC board.
no,
Were you ever on that board?
no. I
Was
don't
that
believe.
wasn't that Kleiner? Who was the VC in that?
Well, you had Kleiner, you had Sigma Partners, you had AT&T, you had
Yeah, you had some
Greylock,
heavyweights. Heavyweight.
heavyweight.
Yeah.
John was on the board of advisors.
Oh, okay. But you guys weren't in the board meetings.
No,
There you go. Okay. That's it. So that's the other thing. If you wind up with the heavyweights,
you are
they're sitting there going like, we don't see
yeah,
you're going to add a lot here. So you're just a distraction. Just,
right.
you know, so Tom Noonan, if you want an advisor, that's great, but he's not
No,
sitting in our board meetings. And
yeah.
was Tom the chairman?
Yes.
He was. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
He's a good thing. So then I go to, so that board, for example, the IS when that VCs came in, that was a quarterly meeting, or those were, because that was very early stage.
There would have been monthly meetings in the beginning.
Even with those high powered VCs.
Yeah, because you think about where ISS was. It was in a market where we didn't know when the market was going to really take off. Because remember, there was internet was relatively new. We felt comfortable that security was an issue, but we didn't know when people were going to buy. And so while we got the VCs to come in early, they were still a lot of unknowns at the time.
That makes sense. I got it. So they were sort of what we'll call they had one foot into, we're a startup board, okay, to another one, we're a growth board, right?
Right,
So we talked about purpose, okay, so there wasn't much of a purpose to the friends and family board. The angel board, if you will, when angel finance, that purpose of that board is for the company to get traction and to become a real economic proven entity, if you will. In other words, we seem to have in place, we know who to sell to, we know how much to charge for it. We're on our way to, we need more volume in order to get to positive cash flow. That's what that board is really all about.
right,
What happens you get to the VC board? Now you're getting into a growth area.
right. So
Okay.
so your VCs are generally people who have grown businesses who
Yeah.
know what need to be done. They know what changes need to be, because you gradually got to make your changes, because you in an early stage company, you're still doing product development to a certain degree. You're still making sure the product got no bug, or they always have bugs, but not many bugs. and you are trying to create the market. When you get into that VC round, you are all about trying to grow that market now. Now you got your product, the product is done, you got your pricing. Now about how do you grow? What is the best way to grow?
Yeah, it's sort of what we'll say another way to do it. And this is important, I think, for entrepreneurs to understand. The VC phase says you've kind of eliminated, all of the variables that could kill you.
No, you have reduced them.
Reduce them.
You haven't
Never eliminate.
you haven't eliminated them, or you still could not have market acceptance.
Still.
Oh, you know, think about Charlie Audio Flax, and think how many times that company pivoted.
Yeah, but we never got VC money there.
No, the whole point is, even if he had VC money, he would still been pivoting because he never found true market acceptance.
Yeah, but what I always looked at is I always looked at the VCs and I'm saying, look, we're growth guys. We know we have like a stable of managers, if you will, and we have good ties in the industry. And what we're going to do is we want to just pour fuel on the fire, okay, as opposed to being in whiteboard meetings trying to figure out who should we sell to this week.
Well, yeah, you are kind of in between the two when you are the Series A round. By the Series B round, you have gotten to your point.
Okay.
Part. But
I'm just putting fuel on the fire at that point.
In Series A, you hope you have gotten market acceptance. You hope you figure out pricing, but you may not have gotten it all solved, but you got enough of it solved that we feel comfortable investing.
So those VCs, they really are early stage guys that are on that board.
They are the late.
They're willing to step back and say, hey, are we really selling to the right person? Is our pricing right?
Right.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
you do the A round.
So they might be still in product market fit then.
No, generally you have your product done. Now, you may still be trying to figure out what part where you sell to in the market.
I got it. Okay.
But you have eliminated or reduced your risk both on product and market because you have made substantial progress.
But the thing is that again, I'm thinking about what board members do I want on my board at that stage. You have to continually look at, well, what are my needs? What are the big rock problems that still need to be solved? And how can these people help me?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
And the no comes from the viewpoint that when you do the VC round, they determine who comes on the board. They tell you who they are putting on the board. You don't have a say-so.
Well, if they're in at that stage, does that mean they understand what your needs are and they're capable of helping you solve that?
Most of the time, but not always. But
sometimes no.
Sometimes no. But remember, your financing documents determine everything. So they determine the VCs who fund that round will determine how many VCs are on the board, how many company people on the board, how many independent on the board, and they will tell you who the VCs are going to be. And they will tell you that at least one of the company people is the CEO. So you get to determine one company person in addition to the CEO, and then you mutually agree to determine who the independent is. So you don't have say-so in this. What the VCs come in about who come in onto the board from the investors.
I get that.
Now you have say-so on the independent, and you have say-so on the common shareholder, except that one of the common has to be the CEO.
Well, I would hope that one of the things that you have to do is you have to come to an agreement as what are the challenges to get to this next milestone, okay? And let's make sure that we have a board that can help us move in that direction.
I can tell you most of the time that it never brought up.
How about that?
The VC determined what it needed. Because most of the time, whoever the VC is that is leading the deal is the VC that's going to be on the board. Now, if he and the way you get two VCs on the board, you generally have two or three VCs funding it. Whoever put the most money in, number one and number two, will be the people on the board. Now, some VCs, not many, but some will actually have a group of people that they put on boards in lieu of their investors. They will have other CEOs from businesses that they have funded that they may put on the board. But that's not common.
Right. But they can do that. So they'll put operators in there or some managers of some types that they trust.
Yeah.
They could represent us well, particularly at the stage that the company's in at this point.
Right.
I got it.
But I can give you a story of one company I was on the board of. It wasn't one of my more traditional investments. It was a recycling business.
Uh-huh.
We had a Swiss man board, weird number. We had the CEO, we had two attorneys, we had two VCs, and we had me, had the angel investor. The two VCs were represented by MBA people who worked at the firm as analysts who knew absolutely zero about the business.
Or about business. Okay.
Right. All they knew were numbers. They wanted to go down to P&L every meeting and just talk about the numbers, not about the business. Bigot wasted energy.
What about the two attorneys? What did they do?
One attorney knew nothing about the business, and one attorney kind of knew about the business. But they
guy that was running the business, what was, the founder, I guess, is who it was, right?
No,
he was the chairman?
One of the attorneys was actually the founder. He founded the business and then brought in the CEO to run the business. And the CEO knew what he would do. He and I knew the business.
Oh, my God. What a goodness.
That was a mess.
That's another discussion we're going to have, though, is about investment thesis. I love where you say, this was a business that I normally didn't invest in. That means that you left your thesis, okay?
Yeah.
On what you invest in. So we're going to talk about that another time. And I'm sure that'll help a lot of angel investors. So then the question I have is, in all of these different phases that we go through, okay, there you are. You went away for a second. You still with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. These different phases that we go through, what's the impact on the founder, CEO of the company? At the friends and family, there's some impact because he has to talk to his friends and family, right?
Right.
You're taking money. You have some responsibility to tell people what's going on. And if you don't, they call you.
No, I would probably disagree there. It truly friends and family. You get their money and you don't hear from them and you don't talk to them.
Okay, good. So it doesn't impact you. You just now have money and you're doing whatever you do.
Well, it impacts you if you can't get the amount of money that you need to flood that round. Let's say that you determine you need $300,000 for friends and family around, and you can only raise $200,000, and it takes you 6 months to do that. That impact where you can go with the business while you are trying to raise the money.
Okay, I'm with you. So now but that's a money raising deal. I'm wondering from a board standpoint, how does it impact me?
It doesn't fund the board.
Right. So then what happens at the angel level? How am I impacted? Now that I've taken angel money, how does this board impact me?
Well, you now have another person or two that you have to talk to. You and your co-founder can't just sit down over drinks one night and make all the decisions about how the company going. Now you got the one or two angels that you have to bring in. You have to give them update on how the company doing on a monthly basis. And, depending on how the agreement run, when you come to making certain decision, you can't make that decision any longer on your own. You have to have the angel investor involved.
So now I have accountability.
You have accountability.
The friends and family, I'm really unaccountable.
Right.
But with the angel level, now I'm actually reporting to somebody.
Yes, you are.
They might not be able to fire me.
They might not be able
Right.
to.
But they can't, but I am responsible
Right.
to report to them.
They can keep you from doing something you want to do, depending.
Okay. So that's a big impact.
Yes.
I've lost my complete authority, right?
Well, not your
Now it's
complete.
compromised.
You're compromised. Your
I got it. So then I go to the VC round. How does that impact me as the entrepreneur? How does that board impact me? Okay.
You now have more people you have to talk to and get consensus, because with the angel round, you only had one angel, you only had to talk to one person. Now you got a VC round, you may have 2 or 3 VCs, so you have to talk to that many more people, and you have to be sure that both of them agree, because if they don't both agree, you won't get anything done. So you spend more time negotiating, and you have to worry about if one VC has one opinion and the other one has another opinion.
So now you're responsible. Really, this is when board chairmanship actually shows up. I mean, you have responsibility not only as the CEO, but you've got to keep all of the all the goats sort of herded together,
Right.
because they're always walking off.
Yes.
So you're managing a board at the VC level.
Right.
And then as you get into further VC rounds, okay, you lose more and more of that authority over the board, I would think.
Yes, because you have your board can grow. You might go to a 9-member board. Then you have that many more. And when you get to a 9-member board, you've got to worry about that the VCs come in at different points in the company. So the VCs who came in first may have one objective about when they should get out, whereas the VCs who come in last may have a different timing that they want to get out of the company.
Yeah, and that creates I did talk to a VC recently that created a lot of stress. The later round guys didn't want to sell because there wasn't enough in it for them. And so you get stuck as an earlier round guy, VC even, for multiple rounds of VC. So it's just nasty.
I had the reverse. I had a company where we had 3 rounds of VC, and the 3rd round went out earlier than the other 2 rounds. And remember the golden rule: last money in rules.
Yeah.
And so they did rule in the end. We wound up selling that company earlier than some of it would have liked.
When you look at these boards, okay, and that's the last question I have about how it affects entrepreneurs. You look at these different friends and family, angel, VC, Series A, then you got Series B, C, whatever it is, and then you got public, okay? Okay. Friends and family is in it for the entrepreneur, okay? By the time I get out here to public, I don't care about the entrepreneur.
Right, you don't.
I'm in it for the business,
Yes.
right? So how does that, as you look at it, when did the focus move? When does it start moving through these different phases from I'm looking out for the entrepreneur versus I'm looking out for the shareholder?
Well, it changes.
A shift has to have to take place, right?
Well, it changes when you begin the angel round.
Okay.
Because once you go to the angel round, I, as a board member, had to worry about fiduciary duty to the shareholders, to the creditors. But to do that, I had to make sure the entrepreneur is growing the business and knowing what he's doing. So that began to shift right there.
Yeah, but when you invested not only the opportunity, but you invested in the person. Right.
Right.
So you as an angel, you've got you're holding them both reins, if you will. But by the time I get out here to the next 2 phases,
probably by the time you get
I'm looking for a guy to run the business. I'm not looking that it necessarily has to be the entrepreneur.
Well, that happened in somewhere between the A and B round.
It does.
Generally.
Okay. So I moved to I'm all for the shareholders.
Yeah.
So I go from I'm all about the entrepreneur, friends and family, to by the time I get to BC, I'm all about the shareholders.
Yes.
I think that's a huge thought for people that are entrepreneurs to be thinking about that. And remember, even in a public company, Steve Jobs got fired.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But he also got brought back. Remember
But he
that.
got brought back after he learned. I always say he went off and did Next.
Yeah.
And who was the major shareholder in Next? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
It was Ross Perot.
Oh,
I think Ross Perot mentored Steve Jobs, who was then open to becoming a manager. And he learned from Ross Perot how to do that.
well, and that where his shortcoming was when he was with.
Exactly.
He didn't
So
know
when
how.
he came back in, he now had 5 years of experience as a real CEO under a real manager,
Yeah.
Ross Perot. And then he took over Apple and he ran it properly. That's how it works. You got to learn at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And
Okay.
sometimes you go through some hardship, i.e., he got terminated from Apple.
Yeah, that was ugly.
Yeah.
That was ugly. I knew a guy. There was a guy that spoke at the High Tech Prayer Breakfast, and he recently passed away. A guy named Walt Wilson, who worked with Steve Jobs back then in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was in the board meeting when they fired Steve Jobs. So he joined Steve Jobs when, Apple was, a couple hundred people, right?
Yeah.
And he was sort of a right-hand man to Steve. And then he said, I was in this board meeting and I watched him leave the board meeting after being fired and walking out the door. And he said, I just kept saying, what's going to happen to the company? Steve is leaving. Okay.
Yeah.
It was because he went from being an entrepreneur guy to now he's working with corporate guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It really was, that was a tough transition. I'll never forget him saying, I was watching him go out the door. That would have been a very dramatic scene.
Oh, yeah. No, I've been in one of those board meetings, very similar.
Oh. You have?
Yeah, and I knew it would come.
Because you're a board member.
No, I happened to be corporate secretary.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And I had been made aware of what was going to transpire. And it didn't happen to the end of the board meeting.
Oh my God. So you had to sit through the whole thing knowing it was coming. That's awful.
Yeah.
And so you had this knot in your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And how did it end? What did it end like? Friendly, or did it end like
Semi-friendly.
So he didn't throw his laptop at the board members or anything?
No.
Okay.
But he did get up and walk out.
Oh, he did. All right. Oh my God. Was that a big company?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. That'd be a tough one. That's amazing to me that somebody would come in as a CEO and be surprised. That says something about the relationship between the board and the CEO.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right. Well, I think we've covered this in great depth. So if you look, and let me ask you this. As somebody who, I want you to give me two perspectives, the board member perspective and the CEO perspective. Have you enjoyed sitting on these boards, and why?
Well, I do, because it gives me the opportunity to interact with the entrepreneur even more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are just an investor in an entrepreneur and you aren't on the board and he is looking to primarily the board for his input, then I don't get to really interact with him.
Okay.
Or if I'm on the board, then that gives me the opportunity to work with him, to help him, and to, hopefully help grow the company and maybe not make some of the errors that might get made. But if you are an investor, unless the entrepreneur reaches out to you, you really don't have a lot of input into what happens. Particularly
So you'll take on the responsibility and liability, okay, to be this to be accountable to creditors and also shareholders for the opportunity. You'll take on that for the opportunity to help shape the company, to work with the entrepreneur.
Yes.
That trade-off is worth it.
Oh yeah, it is. Because
Okay.
we feel, or I feel, and John did, that we brought more to the table than just money. We brought
Mm,
the ability to help and to help the entrepreneur. And if you aren't really at kind of the board level, you don't always get that opportunity to do
okay.
that. Because that one reason we determined to invest in the early stage. 'Cause we could come in with the A stage VCs, and we would never have had any input. That we would just been another check, and the VCs would taken the board and done everything.
Okay.
Because see that
Now I
what
want you to answer this question, and this is just your observation. How would you say the entrepreneurs, okay, have they enjoyed this board experience by and large? The ones that, I mean, you've been involved with a heck of a lot of entrepreneurs and been on 130 boards. Would you look at them and say, I bet you if I did a survey of them, they would go, oh, it was the best experience of my life.
no,
You're saying that you've enjoyed it.
I enjoy.
What would they say?
I don't think they would have enjoyed. Well, it, they are one complication to that question. They have had to go out and raise money to get board members, i.e., to get board members. The raising money had never been good. I don't know any entrepreneur that had told me he enjoyed going out and raising money.
Right.
Therefore, you wind up having a negative impact or a negative vision to people about how you got to know them and where they came from. Board members come from having had to go out and raise money.
That's a great insight. So the fact that I'm the sort of the I had one entrepreneur once tell me I'm out. Well, I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm out buying money." Okay, was I thought it was a great expression because
Mm-hmm.
it costs you
Yep.
whatever it is, it's going to cost you. And another one is, you're out there hat in hand, right?
Yeah.
Trying to convince people this of the opportunity that you
Mm-hmm.
offer them
Yeah.
and that they should buy your shares. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it's about. So that puts me in an immediate, almost subservient sort of capacity. Okay. And then when we get to the board, now all of a sudden I go from I had complete authority to now I have compromised authority
Right.
to eventually no authority, right? I mean,
Right.
in fact, okay.
Right.
So
And
that's not going to be a pleasant experience for the guy that says, well, I started the company, I could do what I want.
right. And you think about it, that you have to keep the board members happy with the progress you are making, or they won't support you when you go out and raise money the next time.
So accountability
That's,
and
yeah.
so it really puts a lot of pressure. As soon as you start taking money and you start getting into boards, you now have people above you. Okay. You have responsibility to the shareholders that have been in there in the past. It's really, it's a less than wonderful, and fun experience.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
less than.
It becomes real.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just able to just say anything that we want to say and do anything we want to do. And you have people that you're accountable to and that you have to hit performance goals. And if you
Yes.
don't, you fail.
Yeah.
And if you fail, you're out
Yeah.
or they're out, which is
Yeah.
equally bad, right?
Right.
Because now you lost your support team for
Mm-hmm.
actually raising money because you don't have any references to raise money around. Wow. So there's the real part of this for the entrepreneurs that are listening here. When you start raising money, you start getting aboard and you're on a train now on where you're headed.
Yeah.
It gets to be very, very serious.
Well,
So what are your final words of advice to entrepreneurs that are early in this path? They're the friends and family guys, or they've gotten that first angel round, if you will. What's your advice to those entrepreneurs?
do the best you can and keep people informed. Board members and investors
Hmm.
hate to be surprised. I had an entrepreneur who raised like $7 million from angels and VC. It was his second round of funding. We go to a board meeting about a month, 6 weeks later, $7 million is gone. He has sent it off. Company with our cash. We had a very unhappy board.
We had, it's funny you should say that. I don't know if it made me feel worse or made me feel better, but I remember there was a company that was, that I had invested in through a holding company kind of a deal. And they brought in a new CEO. I really liked the guy. And he was saying, we're looking to just raise another $250,000. And we had a couple of meetings, and I said, I'm good for $50,000. And I did the $50,000. Now I'm pretty much a passive investor in that particular deal. 3 weeks later, I walk to where their offices are, and there's the programmer. I was leaving to go home. This was outside of the ATDC. They were in the garage remember that? Yeah. And there's the programmer. And I said, what's going on? I said, where's the CEO? He goes, oh, he got fired. I said, where's everybody else? Oh, they got fired too. I'm the only guy that works here now. And he's a programmer. That's all that was there. I said, what kind of money is here? He goes, oh, the money's all gone. And I just wrote the check for $50,000. It was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So $7 million in 30 days, you said?
Yeah.
Oh God, that would be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But that was my money. But if you put $7 million in and you have to be accountable to limited partners, that's a different deal. Or you would have to report to John Emley, hey man, I just wrote a check for 100 and it's gone, right? Jesus Christmas. All right. So the advice was make sure you communicate well with everybody and frequently.
Yeah.
And as an investor, I can tell you that is so important to me. And the investments that didn't do that are the ones that I have no relationship with the people. They don't trust me. I don't trust them. It's just an awful place to be. Awful place to be. So no information is always bad information.
Yes, it is.
How it kind of works. Okay. Well, Sig, thanks for this. This turned into something I think would be very valuable for entrepreneurs. At least they know what's coming if they would take the time to listen to what we've talked about. Right. I learned a lot from you. You're wonderful. Let me just wrap it up, and then we'll wrap up ourselves after we get offline here.
Okay.
Well, thanks for joining us, me and Sig. Sig has got, if you've been on 130 early stage boards and some of those VC boards and later stage, as well as public boards and subsidiary boards of public companies. I mean, a wealth of experience was shared with you today. What's important to the entrepreneur is know where you're headed, know what you're asking for, know what it means. There's not a lot of status in the board as there is a lot of accountability and a change in the way that you operate your company, because it begins not becoming just your company. So think about it. You got a lot to think about here. And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to more meetings with Sig so that Sig can share his secrets with us. Take care. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.